Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm extremely proud to be here, standing in front of anybody part of the Major League Baseball organization. But as you guys came walking in, did you guys see like the video of the guys jumping out of the, or landing out of the plane? Actually, not really jumping. We're just kind of flying. So that was the Navy parachute team. And I was first introduced to Major League Baseball on a grand organization jumping into your guys' stadiums. And so I thought that was a fitting intro because it is, I was able to meet some of the most professional people, and I feel like that's a continued mirror throughout my years in the SEAL teams. So my very first jump into a stadium was in Peoria, right around 2012, and we're the San Diego Padres. Guys, they not show up, or am I? Oh, there we go. Okay, all right. Jerry Coleman was at that game, and if you don't know who Jerry Coleman is, legendary broadcaster, Hall of Famer. And he happened to be calling that game. And after we jumped in, they asked, hey, does anybody want to go up and meet some of the talent for the San Diego Padres, the on-air talent? And absolutely, I was all about it. So as we went upstairs, Jerry Coleman and another guy by the name of Ted Leitner were calling that game. Jerry Coleman, if you don't know, was a veteran, right? A World War II veteran. He was in the league, went and served, and then went on to a Hall of Fame career, obviously. This guy literally takes off his headphones. The public affairs person says, hey, there's a SEAL here to see you. The guy who may or may not have landed on his feet in center field at the, and he stands up, takes his headphones off, and he turns around and walks over to me. He goes, hey, when did you get back from your deployment? 3 months to the day. What was interesting about that deployment was it was 10.5 months long. And most deployments and special operations are smaller because they're a little more compact or high tempo, I should say. So he turns around, he grabs my hand, pulls it close, and he said, they won't understand. And I sat there, I was like, you know, I was the new guy to your guys' Major League Baseball scene, and I said, excuse me, sir? And he said, and he pulled me closer and he said, they won't understand. It's extremely powerful because I didn't expect, number one, right? It's a Hall of Fame guy, a World War II veteran, which if you know anything about them, they're the greatest generation. Otherwise, we'd probably be all sitting here speaking German. But he took the time to look in my face, and taking the headphones off was extremely powerful. If those are the type of people that have been around your organization for so many years, the least I can do is come back and hopefully give you guys a couple of tools. And I don't expect anybody to understand what I've done. I can't understand how much you guys do for your athletes. But I hope today that somehow I can give like a or two and write down. And if you don't, no big deal. I just hope to give you guys something in return for even that small moment. As Nate said, I've been in the SEAL teams over 22 years at this time. I did 5 deployments to Iraq back to back, and then I've done my last couple deployments. I've done 7 overall, have been in and around some of our new adversaries in the Indo-Pacific region. And my last deployment, if we have any Japanese folks in here, that country is unreal. If you haven't been to Japan, if you haven't been to Okinawa, that culture is badass. So thank you. I see some different folks in here. So, so my vision for today, you know what, before I move on to that, the collaborators in military, I truly believe there's not a stronger professional organization out there than Major League Baseball that is directly connected to the military. With the amount of games and just coming to San Diego, there are numerous teams that have taken our guys to games, and they take our guys with their kids to games. And if you know anything about the military, we don't have a whole lot of time. So you guys taking the time out of your schedule just to leave tickets for a SEAL or any military member is absolutely huge. Nate mentioned it, he wears the A on his chest. To our kids, if you have that emblem on your chest, you're giants, right? And on average, Naval Special Warfare SEALs are gone right around 140 to 200 days a year. That's not included in the deployments. That might sound familiar to you guys on how much that you guys are gone. And you know how valued that time is with our kids. So Major League Baseball does that on a consistent basis. It's unreal. So absolutely thank you to everybody in this room. I want to move on to this first one. All right, the Trident. This is, like I said, I have 22 years in, 7 deployments. At this time, I coach all of our instructors that work with the SEAL teams before they deploy. So it's kind of a multi-tiered system, but my 100% job every single day, every day I wake up, is I try to make my instructors better because I want my people to come home. That is my number one goal, without question. This is what I wear on my uniform that represents that. I want to talk about the Trident. If you look at the eagle, can you see how the head's kind of bowing down? It's the only United States emblem where the eagle is actually bowing. It's to represent humility. That's another thing I remember every day. The Trident, the 3-pronged in the middle, is obviously because we're born from the sea, and then the flintlock is the gun. So even though you're humble, that doesn't mean you can't kill somebody on a whim, right? Like, all of us can step up at any single time. This is just a great emblem of that. This is what SEALs wear on our chest every single day. All right, I kind of went through the contributors. Obviously, wanted to thank Nate Shaw. Absolutely want to thank Jason Meredith and the whole Milwaukee Brewers organization. I've got a list of guys here: Ian Kadish from the Minnesota Twins, the Chicago Cubs, the Giants, the Marlins, the Reds, the Rockies, the Nationals. That's just the guys that have come and visited our base in the last year. So if you come to San Diego and you get a hold of their staff and you want to bring your strength and conditioning staff over to our base and maybe walk around for an hour or two and kind of see where our guys are forged, you're more than welcome to get a hold of me. So I can't thank you enough for having me come out to represent the military as well as naval special warfare. Does everybody, or do a lot of people have families in the military or some version of it? I'm seeing a lot of heads nod. We do have one Ranger sitting by himself, which is not surprising. Does most people have? So was anybody here? Is anybody here a veteran? Besides, okay, awesome. Well, thank you for you guys. But more importantly, thank your families. Thanks for all the families that are out here of those veterans. Anybody that knows anything about, like we were talking about, the time that's away from the families, it is the families that pay the most. So thank you for that. All right, so the reason brought me here today. So I wanted to talk about relationships as far as communication and how that goes. So this is ISIS. This is their little high school photo. In 2016, when I was going on deployment with SEAL Team 1, our number one goal on that deployment was to go to the most deadliest place in the planet. At that time, it was Al-Assad, Iraq. It's on the border of Syria, or on the border of Syria and Iraq. It's the most westernmost base that the United States has. It's coming to attack the last couple of months, I think 60 sometimes, where Syria is starting to push into there because of the different things going on around the world. So it's been a hotbed for a while. My platoon was chosen to go on deployment. And once we moved into Al-Assad, it was literally a dot, and around the whole base was ISIS. That's all we pretty much need to know. When we went out on that deployment, as soon as I stepped off that plane, I was super excited because this was the most deadliest place in the world. This is where we want to be. And the other SEAL platoon had already left, which is not a good feeling, because now what base am I going to take over if I don't even get to know what's going on currently in that situation? I'm sure there are many situations where you guys have stepped into and there hasn't been clear guidance, right? It's pretty frustrating. You can either take that on board, you can be frustrated about it, and how you react to that, everybody sees at all times. In this specific deployment, I was in charge of that platoon from SEAL Team 1. So number one, there was no turnover. As I stepped onto the base, I said to myself, I have nothing better to do today than be great. I have nothing better to do today than be lethal. That mindset, if you constantly say it to yourself, once I wake up, I step out of my room, I have nothing better to do than to give. And I'm trying to give to my guys the greatest deployment they could have. and absolutely destroy ISIS, right? But there's all those steps that you have to do. And the number one step was relationships. As we stepped onto that base, we didn't have running water. It was poisoned with arsenic. My guys couldn't shower. We had a Marine regiment that was in charge of the security of this small base. And it was straight out of, I don't know, like Bad News Bears, if anybody's old enough to actually see that movie, or it looked like storm clouds were above these guys' heads. And I started walking around this base to try to see what the relationship, the temperature was at this base. And the SEALs prior didn't have a whole lot of freedom of maneuver. And whether that's their own fault, whether that's just what was coming down to them, it didn't matter. The point was the relationships were broken, not only with the people on the base, but probably the most important, at least to me, is if my guys can't sleep at night, how can I go out and operate? So the number one thing that I had to do to be lethal that day was to develop a relationship with water, electricity, and most importantly, my security. So as I started walking around the base, after about the first 3 weeks, we never got water that whole deployment, but at least we got electricity so I could begin to then push out and actually do my real mission, which was to get after ISIS. The number one thing I had to do by stepping on the base and trying to repair those relationships was take ownership of a relationship that wasn't even mine. I had to step into, hey, we're Navy SEALs. You guys see our tridents big and shiny. And I had to step into a 22-year-old Marine's office who had been pissing in bottles for about 4 months in 105-degree temperatures and tell him, I'm sorry. I apologize. This is on me. I didn't find out about al-Assad and all the problems that you guys had back in the United States. I had plenty of time to do that. Why didn't I? I didn't take ownership of where I was going because I automatically assumed that it was going to be taken care of for me. So the Marine kind of looks at me and he's like, I don't know what you're saying, sir. Like, because he's never been apologized to from somebody outside of their organization. I want to make security better for you. I want to make the guys stronger fighting positions. I want to start setting up some different sniper hides, and I want my guys to help you. That was number one. Number two, I had to make a better relationship with the base that was supplying our base with water and food. I wanted my guys fed better, and on top of that, I wanted my security fed better. You guys can absolutely see where I'm going with this. If I can protect the people around me, now that gives me freedom of maneuver inside my own. Like I can't get after ISIS if I can't sleep. I can't get after ISIS if my guys can't eat. Or if we're so concerned about security that our guys have no freedom of maneuver to start developing target packages and everything that's associated with that, the relationship was absolutely broken. So cool, got it, done that. Now I started to move on to the relationships on why there were no ISIS actually killed during this last, the guys that I turned over with. So I put success on here with the guys smoking because we have very dark rooms where we have indigenous people helping us, right? We have partner forces because if you step into, let's say you're driving to a new neighborhood, right? And actually, you know what, I'll take that back. Say a new car drives up your road in your neighborhood. Does everybody kind of look at it? Because you're like, okay, that car does not belong here, correct? It's the same thing overseas. A white guy cruising around Iraq does not fit in, right? So we have to have other people to help us. We use relationships. Well, in the back room, we had guys that were able to listen to what ISIS was talking about, but they smoked a ton and they didn't smell the greatest. And they might have been stuck to their chairs for about 6 to 7 months. So just think about that small, it's like a cigar bar without a shower or ever going home. I don't know how better to absolutely describe that. So once I got in that room, I sat down with Ahmad and Muhammad. There's these two, actually one was from Chicago, from North Chicago, and another guy was, I'm not sure what city he was from Illinois, but they were both obviously Middle Eastern, but they were US citizens that came over to the US in 1983. They had never seen a SEAL step in their office. And more importantly, when I stepped in that office, I didn't tell them to stop smoking. I didn't tell them to change what they were doing. I sat down and said, how are you? What do you guys have going on? What do you do? what do you guys think you do? Like, oh, well, we're listening to ISIS. We're trying to anticipate their next move. What do we do with that information? Like, how does that start to conglomerate into something targetable, right? If I know where you're going, it makes it a lot easier to remove you from the planet. I'm trying to think of a nicer way to say that, so like that. So as I got to hang out in the Iraqi cigar bar for about 2.5 hours, I got to know him more than just the headphones, right? That just taking a chance to open the door, no matter what the preemptive, the perception that they have of the SEALs before, that's gone now. I'm here, right? And letting him know that. And then once they're done, listening to whatever they're doing, as they come out of there, invite them to come out of the room. Be a part of that team. That was my number one priority. You can see how important intelligence would be, right? Number two, in the corner of corner of our joint operations center, right, where everybody comes together every single day, and we talk about what we're going to do, hopefully the next week, the next month. There's this guy over in the corner, and he's got all this Chuck E. Cheese crap all over the wall. Not a SEAL, obviously. And in the SEAL culture, it would be interesting if a guy walked around with a Chuck E. Cheese t-shirt on. This guy is a grown man, by the way. This is not a kid hanging out in our joint operations center, but he was a 20-some-year-old kid. And I immediately was like, so, hey, what do you think you do here? He's like, well, I don't really talk to you guys. Like, I'm over here. He was managing our gathering. Like, he was pretty much operating our drones, right? And developing a pattern of life on what ISIS was doing. But he had never even talked to the SEALs previously, who had never talked to my Iraqi cigar bar, right? So if my guys are listening and not developing a relationship with the guys that are actually can hear what is going on in the ground, what is the point of even having a SEAL team there if you can't go out and do anything? So I sat down with Mr. Chuck E. Cheese. His name was Joe, a fantastic guy. And he was developing maps on where ISIS would move. And in these maps, it's like a Google Maps for adults, or for SEALs, I should say. And he was actually physically marking the maps. In Iraq, they build buildings to look like schools. ISIS does at this time. Sorry, not Iraq. ISIS did. Why would they build a building to look like a school? So we can't attack it. Makes sense. Then the next building, it looks like a mosque. The next building looks like a school. They've effectively taken away our freedom of maneuver from seeing it over the sky. You have to get down on the ground and go in and see. And most of them, I've got numerous pictures where they had IED factories inside schools. Nobody's going to school, by the way. I don't know if anybody's checked the top 100 schools in the world. It's not in Al-Assad, right? Like, so as Joe is taking that information, he's writing school on the Google map. And nobody was there to look over his shoulder and say, hey, have you ever read the other intel summaries on that? Or you're just watching drone footage? You can see where I'm going with this. So, ego. I had to stow my own ego and sit down with Chuck E. Cheese. And by the way, I Googled Chuck E. Cheese numerous times. I know about fun passes. I know, like, what the bands, the timelines are. He would watch when the band would perform on Facebook. There's some weird shit going on, by the way. This is like the worst communication brief ever. But anyways, we'll get to that. So as I developed a better relationship with Joe and Chuck E. Cheese now, I got to influence on how he would mark things. Potential school could be a potential mosque. Instead of for sure saying that's what it is and then it can no longer change, I would try to give him influence on that. And then guess who I brought in? The Iraqi cigar bar. It was a party. We had Chuck E. Cheese, cigars, and everybody stunk within 3 meters of each other. And they discussed on how ISIS was moving things back and forth. You can't do that unless, yes, big, strong Navy SEAL, Chuck E. Cheese, stow your ego, take ownership of the problems that you've had happen before, and communicate and give it the chance to actually build a better team. Now, I haven't talked about the platoon that I had with me. 18 guys are the most solid people. They're very, very dangerous people. And there are numerous stories on how I had to take ownership of previous problems in that platoon to then bind them together. But that's a story for another time. So now I have Chuck E. Cheese. I have Ahmad and Muhammad. Everybody's starting to sing off the same page. How do I make it actionable? There was a guy in our Joint Operations Center that was very good at taking information. Again, he didn't have a great relationship with a lot of the SEALs, and we fixed that. And then finally, we had a guy who also sat in the corner with a sheriff's badge on. He was not a sheriff, but he decided to wear a sheriff's badge. You can only imagine his communication with the SEAL teams was not very much, because anytime you walk in, you see a guy with this sheriff's badge on in the middle of Al-Assad. This place sucks. We're by ourselves. We don't get to see our families. And why are you wearing a sheriff badge, right? And his answer was like, I want to be a police officer one day. I was like, awesome. Take off your fucking badge, man. Like, I can't get my guys to come in and talk to you if you're wearing a fake sheriff's badge. Like, what are you going to dress up like tomorrow? Are the other things? So, you know what? Never mind. I won't get into that. Okay, so once we decided we had the information of where ISIS was and how they were moving around, and once we had information of where they were going to attack, in this deployment, we killed over 350 ISIS in 3.5 months, because the first 2.5 months, I was fixing all the crap that I was just talking to you guys about. Perfect. I remember it pretty well. On a Wednesday, we were literally, ISIS was wearing like the Mark I motto ISIS costumes. What you guys saw up there, they were like marching with flags. I was like, oh, you guys, this is awesome. Like, it looked like an ISIS parade. There were no kids, no women. I'm like, dude, this is amazing. So we're watching it like a Thanksgiving Day parade. And I was like, perfect, let's call the asset. And then which is the planes inside. And I call the guy. It was the first time I call him in 2.5 months. And he's like, yeah, we don't have anything flying today. I was like, well, check this out. And I showed him the picture of the ISIS parade. He's like, that's great, but we don't have anything flying today. Again, we're Navy SEAL. Like, do you understand who I am? Like I feel like I had my Navy SEAL headband on and freaking everything, but it doesn't matter unless you have the influence, the relationship, you stow your own ego. And from that day forward, I called him every single day. Hey, what do we got flying? Now, if the French were flying, they would never bomb anyways. Sorry if there's any French people. But if I had Australian or Americans, it was on. It was absolutely awesome. Is MLB creeping into French yet? France? Yeah, because I just screwed that. But the Canadians are pretty close. I'm kidding. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Anyways, I've got multiple deployments with the Canadians, and they're some of the nastiest. They are badass. So that was up in northern Iraq. Again, story for another time. So as I started talking to him every single day, now instead of taking information from Ahmad and Muhammad, I was actually figuring out who was flying at what time and what day, and then I would tailor my target packages to who was flying and what their mission set was. And that took a lot of time. I was going back and forth to Baghdad and trying to develop that relationship as well. It all came down to stowing my own ego, so that way I was open to at least communicate and talk to. Now, at the end of that, yes, guys started being removed from the earth. My wife was saying, instead of saying, we weren't killing people, right? We were removing the absolute scum of the earth. These people are nasty. If you look up any of this stuff, if you watch the Hamas video, a lot of those same, you can see a lot of the same tactics, techniques, and procedures as ISIS was using. It's a very, very sad thing. I was very fortunate to develop relationships in that 5.5, 6 months, where at that time, President Obama was still in office and it hadn't been changed over to the new Secretary of Defense, which was Mad Dog Mattis, which absolutely changed our battlefield. But at that time, we couldn't do that. We weren't allowed to. Our base was attacked a couple of times and we were able to be kinetic and defend ourselves, but that was not the norm, especially for any US military base at that time. So how do you affect your end goal when you're not on the field? How do you have relationships in your organization right now that are like the ones in the Iraqi cigar bar, right? Nobody had talked to those guys. Do you have, how many, not Chuck E. Cheese specifically, but how many guys do you have in your organization in any form or fashion that are not part of the strength and conditioning, right? Because you have sports science, you have trainers, you have the medical team, you have outside consultants, you have outside influence on your players on how to do your job. There are multiple assets overseas that can do my job. But every single day I stood up and said, I am going to be lethal today. And what can you do to do that? Well, I had developed relationships. When I go home at night, I have 2 awesome kids and a pretty hot wife most of the time. She's actually, yeah, never mind. I told her I was going to say that. So everybody calm down. So when I step out of my car, and as my sons have gotten older, I haven't do this as much, but I would drink a Red Bull and I would go inside my house because I have nothing better to do than to be a dad right now. And you can see how that mindset plays into everything, but it all starts with ownership of yourself and stowing your ego for 10 goddamn minutes. But it has to be authentic. Like when I got to hang out with those, I'm still friends with Joe, sadly. That's awful. I still talk to Joe, and to help him continue his career and to help him understand the different relationships that we all have. But I meant it. A lot of the times we hear, hey, what's the fastest from A to B? It's that straight line. Well, we all have different agendas on what we want to do, or your assistants do, or everybody does. So they might stray a little bit. But if the end goal is to kill ISIS, I am good with talking about whatever you want to talk about, as long as it applies to our mission. If there's guys that want to go out and make Instagram videos and show bicep curls and talk about how that's the way of the future, and you guys have talked about it, but it's still the end game of making your players the best example that they can be, or the best chance they can do to have a long livelihood. And really, it goes on you, right? It's your livelihood. Yes, ISIS could come after our lives, but it's your livelihood. And if you take that relationship and you grab it and attack it and say, hey, the only thing I have to do today is make you good. And some of the players might not take to that, but I doubt that you're going to have a majority kind of like say, well, but you have to prove it. And it comes with performance. And then that's where that authenticity comes in. So own it, stow your ego, build the relationships with everybody around you. And man, you actually, there's really good results, right? Because it doesn't matter anyways, you're away from your families. What do you have better to do than to make everybody else great, right? So that's the main thing. So this is some of the Australian Air Force. And this is a group of guys on one of my last deployments. I'm the guy in the middle, by the way. So this is one of the presidential details for a guy up in northern Iraq. I made to put that on there. He was the president of Kirkuk. He actually worked on Ronald Reagan when he was shot. And that was just another example of relationships that we can talk about some other time if you guys have more questions. So I salute you guys for giving everything you have to your players, to other people. And there's a ton of sacrifice, obviously, with your families and everything like that. So I salute you guys for everything. Thank your families, the veteran families. I can't thank you enough. And thank you, Major League Baseball, for everything that you do for all the military. So that's it.